Shadow Smile Eye, a smile without warmth. The Kellerman residence stood like a perfect tooth in the jaw of suburbia, white, gleaming, and artificially reinforced. Chicago's autumn wrapped around it, but never penetrated. Inside, temperature-controlled air circulated through rooms that resembled museum exhibits more than lived spaces. Margaret watered orchids that weren't dying because they weren't alive. Silk petals glistened under precisely angled recessed lighting. 5 years ago, when real flowers kept failing to thrive, Edward had them replaced. Consistency, he'd explained, is everything in aesthetics. Edward adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror, a ritual performed with the same meticulous attention he gave to extracting molars. His fingers moved with practiced precision, tighten, center, smooth. His reflection smiled back, $10,000 of cosmetic dentistry, creating the perfect advertisement for his practice. They exchanged 27 words over breakfast. Margaret counted them silently as cream swirled in her untouched coffee. None of these words contained meaning beyond the choreography of their morning performance. They moved around each other in the kitchen like dancers who had long forgotten why they ever loved the music. His car, German, black, detailed weekly, pulled from the driveway at exactly 7:42 a.m. Margaret stood at the window, watching its departure. The emptiness he left behind felt identical to his presence. The second the discovery. Tuesday evening brought rain that streaked the windows like silent tears. Margaret was arranging Edward's discarded clothes when his work phone chimed from his jacket pocket. A notification lit the screen. Photos saved to secure folder. Margaret had never touched Edward's work phone. The boundary existed without discussion, like so many of their unspoken laws. But something in her chest cracked open as her finger swiped across the glass. The photos loaded, one after another. Her husband's hands gloved in blue latex. A young woman, perhaps mid-20s, reclined in his dental chair. But the angles were wrong, intimate, calculated. In one image, his hand rested on the patient's shoulder, thumb pressed into the hollow of her throat. In another, his face hovered near hers, not for examination, but for something that resembled feeding. Her stomach didn't lurch, her hands didn't shake. Margaret felt only a surge of Arctic clarity, a rage so crystalline it could cut glass. The betrayal wasn't sex, it was power. Edward treating women like specimens, the same way he'd been treating her for 15 years. Margaret deleted the notification, replaced the phone, and closed the closet door with funeral quietness. The quiet architect. She found Vanessa through channels that existed in whispers: actress, model, survivor. 3 coffee meetings in places far from their neighborhood. Margaret paid in cash, twice what was asked. He has a type, Margaret explained, sliding photographs across the table. Vulnerable, somewhat damaged. Women who won't make eye contact. Vanessa practiced the walk, slightly unsure, shoulders curved inward. Margaret coached her voice. Lower, more hesitant. Yes, like that. They crafted the persona together. Melissa Gardner, recently divorced, dental anxiety, no insurance, a woman who would trigger Edward's predatory instincts. The micro-camera was expensive, nearly undetectable beneath the modest blouse Margaret selected. The audio quality, when tested, captured even the softest whispers. Remember, Margaret said during their final rehearsal, he believes himself untouchable. That's our advantage. Fourth, setting the trap. Edward's office gleamed with the sterile perfection of an operating theater. Diplomas lined walls in identical frames. The front desk staff moved with robotic efficiency, trained to reflect his standards. When Melissa arrived for her appointment, her file contained meticulously falsified records, everything documented to appear legitimate. No flags would be raised. Edward entered the examination room 10 minutes later. His smile, white, perfect, practiced, didn't reach his eyes as he reviewed her chart. "First time with us, Mrs. Gardner. Don't worry, we'll take excellent care of you." The camera captured everything: how his hand lingered on her shoulder during x-rays, the unnecessary proximity as he explained procedures, the gradual escalation of familiarity, testing boundaries with scientific precision. Feeling any discomfort? His voice dropped to a register used only in intimacy or threat. When his fingers brushed her lips while adjusting the bite guard, Vanessa flinched exactly as rehearsed. "Sorry," she whispered. "I'm just nervous around doctors." His smile widened. "I understand completely. We'll go slow." The public exposure. The footage appeared first on a medical ethics watchdog site. By morning, local news had picked it up. By afternoon, national headlines. The editing was masterful. Clinical violations spliced with Edward's public speeches about patient care and dignity. Margaret stood before cameras in a charcoal dress, her face a perfect mask of shocked devastation. "I had no idea," she whispered, voice breaking at precisely the right moment. "I trusted him completely. These women trusted him." More women came forward, former patients, employees. The patterns emerged like ink in water, spreading, undeniable. Edward's attorney advised silence. The dental board suspended his license pending investigation. Longtime patients quietly transferred their records. The German car remained in the garage, collecting dust as invisible as his former reputation. Sixth, the reclamation. Margaret formed an LLC through her cousin's law firm. When Edward's landlord, nervous about association with scandal, sought to terminate the office lease, she was ready with an offer, through intermediaries, 15% above market value. 6 weeks later, Lakeshore Wellness Center opened its doors. The dental chairs remained, but the atmosphere transformed. Soft colors replaced clinical white. Female practitioners filled the staff. A sliding scale fee structure ensured accessibility. Margaret moved through the space in tailored suits, her voice soft but commanding. The practice flourished. Patients, many of them women who had feared dental care for years, found sanctuary in the space built upon ruins. Edward's name appeared nowhere in the building. She had it professionally scrubbed from every surface, every record. 7. The final encounter, December, brought the first heavy snow when Edward's key still worked in their front door. Margaret heard him enter from her study, where she reviewed quarterly profits. He stood in the doorway, diminished, beard unkempt, expensive coat hanging loosely on a frame that had lost 20 pounds. "Maggie," he said, the nickname abandoned years ago. "We need to talk about what happened." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. He sat like a patient in a waiting room. "Would you like water?" she asked, voice pleasant as if addressing a courier. He nodded, throat working visibly. She poured Pellegrino into a crystal glass. His hands trembled slightly as he drank. "I've lost everything," he finally said. Margaret studied him with the detached interest of a scientist observing a specimen. "No, Edward, you've lost what was mine." "Yours?" "My time, my youth, my trust, my dignity." She leaned forward slightly. "I've simply reclaimed them." Understanding crawled across his face like frost on glass. "You set me up." "Say, ah," Margaret whispered, watching comprehension fracture his composure. "And get the fuck out." He left without another word, the front door closing with barely a sound. The final period at the end of their story. 8th, victory in silence. After hours, Margaret walked the empty hallways of her clinic. Moonlight filtered through Venetian blinds, casting ladder-like shadows across freshly waxed floors. Her heels clicked a victory march on tile. The pain hadn't vanished. It had transmuted, becoming foundation instead of weight. She ran her fingers along the wall where Edward's credentials once hung. Now, framed patient testimonials told stories of healing and renewal. In the executive bathroom, she paused before the mirror. The woman staring back had Edward's same precise posture, but something wilder lived behind her eyes now, something ancient and honest. She applied fresh lipstick, not the nude shade Edward preferred, but deep crimson. She didn't smile. Queens don't have to. As she locked the clinic doors, streetlights cast her shadow long across the parking lot. Margaret stepped into it, wrapping darkness around her shoulders like a cloak well earned.
If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications.